Today, Katie Porter drove south from her California congressional district to the Mexican border, where she spent the day at 3 different border facilities asking the kinds of questions that we've seen her so effectively ask in congressional hearings. Katie Porter is a freshman Democratic member of the House who flipped a Republican district in Orange County, California, to win her seat in the House. And so she went to the southern border today as a member of Congress, trying to discover from government officials there exactly who is in charge of what and why. And she saw the conditions there today the way she sees everything, through the eyes of a single mother, which Katie Porter is. She spoke to mothers at the border who have been separated from their families. Katie Porter is a former law professor trained in law school by then Harvard Law School professor Elizabeth Warren. Today, Katie Porter brought her unique brand of systems analysis to those border facilities, the same kind of common sense economic and business analysis we've seen her bring to cross-examining Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, in congressional hearings. And so we are especially fortunate tonight to get Katie Porter's first report on what she found today at the Mexican border. Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter from California. She's a member of the Financial Services Committee. And Congresswoman Porter, it's about, what, an hour and a half, 2 hours south of your district? Do you find yourself at the Mexican border? And what are your most important findings of the day?
I think one of the big takeaways is the degree to which people are, those who are presenting themselves at the border or who are being apprehended at the border, are processing, being passed through many different kinds of facilities relatively quickly. So one of the things that we asked is, what happens here, what happens there? And often the answer was, well, they're not here very long, so we don't do that. Well, they're not here very long, so we don't do that. So if you think about a family who might be transferred 4 or 5 times from that point, port of entry or from apprehension until their final destination, at each of those locations, there's a little bit of an effort to say, well, we can't do that here. We hope the next stop addresses that issue. And so that was something I saw particularly with regard to the need for additional medical personnel and medical training for our Border Patrol agents. I spoke directly with those law enforcement officials, and they are finding that those of them who have their EMT training are being very strained. And so I think that's one of the things we can work on funding and making sure that the funding we have given Border Patrol is going to doing prevention and screening, making sure that we are doing that right from the very start when someone's put into the custody of the Border Patrol.
I know you went at the question of who's in charge of what, and one of the things you're looking at is, okay, who is actually in charge of the detention of this person? Who decides? Where is that decision made? Who makes that decision? And why is it this person? What did you discover about that?
So this was one of the most surprising parts of the visit for me. As a law professor, I took immigration law in law school. I did some clinical work, some pro bono work on unaccompanied minors. This was 20 plus years ago. So at the detention facility run by ICE, one of the questions I asked, I met with 4 women, and they would all like to be released back to their minor children. One woman, 2 of her children are homeless now and living in a car in Orange County, as a matter of fact, as a result of her having lost her job and being in this detention facility. So I asked what is the standard used to decide who gets paroled? When people are paroled, all adults are given ankle bracelets for tracking purposes, dates to check in and things like that. I said, well, who makes that decision? And I was very surprised to learn that it was the head officer there. It's not an immigration judge who's deciding who gets paroled. And so one of the things that he freely said to me is that because there's one person in each of these facilities making those parole decisions, that there's a lot of inconsistency potentially across our border with different folks having different experiences in terms of how long they're staying in detention. The officials there were very forthcoming, but they told us that their goal is to have people in detention for about 45 days to 60 days while their asylum claims are being heard and processed. But when we talked directly to the 4 women, they had been there for periods ranging from 5 months to over a year.
And you're talking about people who are being taken from productive jobs that they're doing in California. California has about a 27% population of immigrants, and they are then pulled out of those jobs, disrupting the economic order of that job, and then disrupting the economic viability of their families.
No, absolutely. I mean, I asked all of the women I spoke to who had been in the United States and then were picked up or detained by ICE. One of the women was actually detained when she went into ICE to do her regular check-in. She was then taken to a facility. So she actually had been checking in for months, and at one of her check-ins, she was actually detained and taken to this facility. But one of the things I heard from them is how disruptive this is to their family and then to our local economy. So one of the women who has 4 children, all of them are U.S. citizens, described how her oldest daughter dropped out of college in her final semester, right before she was due to graduate, to care for her younger siblings, the youngest of whom is 9. And so there is really a strain being created by putting people in detention for long periods of time, uncertain release dates, because then we're straining the social safety net to try to care for those families. And I was able to go visit one of the migrant shelters being run by a community organization today and see the incredible work that they're trying to do to meet the needs of these families.
Congresswoman Katie Porter, always an honor to have you join us, and we really appreciate you giving us your report on what you found there today. Really, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.